Randy,
Hey.
how are you?
Oh, thanks.
You
How are
guys-
you?
Good.
Yeah, who are you anticipating?
Wasn't it awful about that reporter being killed, Dylan Lyons?
You know, I don't know, I didn't read more than just a headline.
You remember him from Gainesville? He was here for 3 or 4 years. And he used to cover most of the city commission and county commission meetings.
Yeah,
Young, I think.
The shooting in Orlando, you mean?
Yeah. Horrible.
yeah,
Yeah.
He had a good future.
yeah.
He moved to the big city, he moved from Gainesville to Orlando.
It's terrible. Two more folks coming, but there is a quorum.
We'll give it a couple more minutes. Who else are we expecting?
Wayne?
Okay. Glad he's coming because I think that would cause him to forfeit his seat if he didn't, right? Yeah. That might be it, right? I forget what the rule is.
Since one of his absences is at the 6-month mark, it'll push that one off.
Okay. All right, well, we can get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Alachua County Land Conservation Board meeting. Today is February 23rd. The time is 5:35. We'll start at the top with the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second,
All those in favor, say aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Sitting to my right is our new LCB member, Aubrey Green. In our normal procedure, why don't we go around and briefly introduce ourselves and want to start?
Okay. I'm Aubrey Green. I have been in Gainesville for 6.5 years. I work for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission as a research biologist. My background is primarily wildlife focused, but also land management as well. But worked primarily in the Southeast, extensively in Florida, throughout the state.
Very good.
Very
Welcome.
interesting.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Russ Weber, I think many of you know me, very good, and here again, and consultant forester. Pleased to be back, looking forward to another term, but I shall not see the nomination of another one.
Shall not see. Is that what you said?
Not seek another
Okay.
nomination for another term.
I'm BJ Bucade. I'm senior scientist for a consulting firm in town and have been in Gainesville 30+ years and got my master's here at the Center for Wetlands.
Paul Irene, I'm a retired blueberry breeder from the University of Florida. I came in 1977 to work on blueberries, and a lot of the ones in the woods around here, ones I started with, gave me an interest in land, which I always had an interest in land conservation. So I live in Micanopy, and this is my second time on the board. I nominated a piece of land, and that's how I got on the board. Yeah.
You have to be careful around here.
You do.
My name is Melissa, and I am National Wildlife Federation's Gold Program Manager. So I work on habitat protection and climate resilience projects across the Gulf, primarily in Florida. And for this role, I worked at Alachua Conservation Trust as land acquisition specialist for the Santa Fe River Basin, as well as surrounding areas. So I have experience in land acquisition and working with a lot of the programs beyond the county funds for acquiring community funds.
I'm Bruce Blackwell. I'm a retired school teacher and also started a conservation organization in 1965 with the support of the the Nature Conservancy, which is still going strong, the Vineyard Conservation Society. And I've been involved also in co-owning an art gallery and antique shop.
What's the name of the shop?
I'm sorry,
What's the name of the shop?
the Granary Gallery. You
Where
can
is
see it on you can pick it up on the internet and they put wonderful things.
Okay. My name is Kristen Young. I am a political consultant and nonprofit grant administrator. I've been in Gainesville for over 20 years now. I worked on what spaces campaigns and land use issues that overlap with environmental issues. And I studied plants at school and I took a class of Dr. Lyring's on plant breeding. So, yeah.
And I'm Brian Block. I'm a commercial real estate attorney. I used to negotiate as an employee of the Nature Conservancy for the county program a long time ago. And back in Gainesville, 20 years, went to undergrad here. That's it. All right. We are on to item 4, approval of the minutes from our January 26th meeting. Do I hear a motion?
I have a note.
Yes.
My name has a extra L in it a couple times, totally fine. Happy with the content. I think everyone knows it was me, but
Okay.
And also, I was not here on that day and I was the second in the motion before. Start that.
For these Jason's notes?
Throw under the bus.
Jason's our secretary.
Anyways.
Not anymore, not anymore. He was then.
Yep.
All right. With those notes into consideration, do I hear any motions?
move to approve with those revisions.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
All Opposed? Motion passes. All right. What we're all here for, property evaluations. The first one being Alachua Creek Flatwoods Blankenship.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ryan Kennelly. I'm a senior environmental specialist with the ACF program. So I'm one of the preserve managers and help out with these evaluations. I'm presenting the Alachua Creek Flatwoods project area Blankenship property. So the Blankenship property is actually immediately adjacent to the Alachua Creek Flatwoods project area. That project area scored a 7.87 out of 9.44. The Blankenship property scored a 5.2 out of 10. It's 68.5 acres in size. That's 2 adjacent parcels under 1 ownership. There is a pole barn on the property, a small pole barn, which we'll see later. The property appraiser page has a just value of $266,250 or just under $3,887 per acre. Total value being the same. This property is on the market with an asking price of $544,000, and the realtor is here tonight. And it was nominated as a fee simple acquisition for this program. So here's the Blankenship parcel in red in the middle of the map. It's along County Road 1469 south of State Road 26. About 3 miles southwest of Melrose, and about 1.5 miles southwest of Black Lake Preserve. That's our closest preserve in this neighborhood. The nearest property that you would have seen somewhat recently brought before you is the Roundtree and Whitehurst property, which we'll see on an additional map here. That was brought back to you in April of last year. That one scored a 5.4, just barely higher than this one, but that one was not added to the eligibility pool. That's in this area, and we'll see that in a minute. Almost 2/3 of this property are included in the Moran's Prairie Strategic Ecosystem. And like I said, there's some of these isolated parcels of the Lackawanna Creek Flatwoods project, and this is right next to one of those. And there is a creek that sometimes, at the time of the site visit, it was not flowing, but sometimes flows through this property and is one of many tributaries contributing to the headwaters of Lackawanna Creek itself. So here's a zoomed in parcel map. Again, there's that creek flowing from east to west. Here's the location of the pole barn. I hope you can kind of make out a couple of pine plantations here. Those, looking back on the historic aerial images, were cleared through the entirety of the 1900s. It may have been row crops, it may have just been pasture. I couldn't really tell beyond that. There's a road coming off of County Road 1469 through the eastern part of the property and then cuts over to this more obvious road through the property. This road originates from the northwest and accesses the property to the southeast, and there is an easement on this road for this neighbor to the southeast to have access to their property. Much of the land that is not currently pine plantation, all the other forested and wetland areas appear to have been unaltered in that span of the 1900s, but I'll talk about that a little more in depth in a minute. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. So zooming back out a little bit here, surrounding parcels are a mix of sizes and land uses. Some of it is still in natural areas, some has homes on it, especially around Lake Elizabeth, and then some of it is in ag. Here's that Roundtree and Whitehurst property to the north. All of the properties and parcels except for the homes around Lake Elizabeth are designated as a future land use of rural agriculture. Really quickly looking at the soils, they range from moderately well drained to very poorly drained, both of those being in the southern end of the property, and the wetland part of Moran's Prairie system off to the southwest. So getting into the natural communities here, the Basin Swamp was in excellent condition in the southwest part of the property where Moran's Prairie kind of extends into the parcel. A couple places it was a little thicker than this, but for most of what we saw, it was a fairly open basin swamp like this with cypress and tupelo in the overstory, relatively open in the midstory and understory with some buttonbush, elderberry, sawgrass, royal ferns, and others. Immediately adjacent and upslope of the basin swamp, and you can sort of see that transition happening here. Most of it is in the background here, but Music Hammock is the next upslope habitat type. The overstory is dominated by large live oaks with pretty little limited understory, except for some of these more thicker vinier areas. We call it in good condition, but there's not a tremendous amount of diversity here. And there's a little bit of ardesia and camphor kind of creeping into the edge of some of this hammock. And then Blackwater Stream. So here's some photos of that creek bed meandering through the property. It does not appear to have been channelized. It does still meander, but some of the stream banks definitely are eroded a little bit. There's cypress and loblolly trees on the sides, some noted chain fern, but at the time of the site visit, it was obviously dry other than a few isolated puddles. That scouring of the stream banks definitely seemed to imply that this creek can experience some pretty flashy conditions, as is evidenced by this next slide. This was one of several culverts downstream from the current road crossing that over the years, clearly they've tried bigger and bigger culverts that just kept getting washed out and are still left in the stream bed downstream. They've upgraded to this timber bridge, which has several telephone poles underneath this decking. So this is that big road you can see through the parcel map where it crosses the creek. We did find a piece of birdie pot in the creek bed, which doesn't necessarily mean it came from this property, but certainly there's a history of turpentine in this area. So there's that bridge is right over this creek crossing here. Again, the music hammock on the outside of the basin swamp and then the basin swamp here. So I'll start talking about the pine plantations and then this eastern edge and most of this southeastern corner. We called it successional hardwoods. So next one. So those pine plantations, they were planted in the early 2000s in slash pine. Fairly devoid of any kind of mid-story, and the understory is also relatively open. But it's all pasture grass, blackberries, and yellow jessamine, and a significant amount of invasive plants throughout both of the pine plantations, especially this northern pine plantation off of 1469. It looks like they may have historically used burning to help clear out the understory. There's char marks on these pine trees, but they look pretty old, so I kind of assume they are mowing to keep this understory open, which is unfortunately contributing to the spread of the invasive plants. Go to the next slide. So throughout here, there's pretty widespread Japanese climbing fern throughout this stand, especially the northern stand and along the adjacent road systems. Widespread camphor trees mixed in that 5 to 10 foot height range with some bigger ones on the edges. We came across 2 dense Kogan grass patches, each about maybe 1/10 of an acre in size. Dense monocultures of coral ardesia along the edges, a pretty thick hedge of Peruvian primrose along County Road 1469, and Caesar weed throughout that is probably underrepresented given the time of year we saw that. So there's definitely some widespread invasive plants on this tract, especially in the pine stands. And then the successional hardwood. So I mentioned that most of that footprint hadn't really seemed to be altered in all of the aerial images from the 1900s, but it seems like that should have been maybe upland hardwood forest or upland mixed woodland or something, but there was just not much species diversity here. This was mostly laurel oaks and water oaks with the occasional live oak and loblolly and slash pine. So we were expecting to see a little bit more, maybe some magnolias or hickories or something, but it was pretty solidly laurel and water oak. No real ground cover, just kind of that tangle of vines and saplings. So there's a picture of that pole barn in the southern part of the property. It's not a very big pole barn, but it has enough to park a tractor and have a tent at the moment. It does have power running to it for a well. There's a few telephone poles out of frame here and in a couple other places on the property. There, we did find a very old like appliance of some kind of buried in the ground, but overall, solid waste was not really a very big issue on this property. A couple bottles here or there. There were hunt stands and feeders throughout the property as well. Just to sort of wrap it up here, there were royal ferns on the property, which are state listed commercially exploited plants. Wildlife we noticed included red shouldered hawk, eastern bluebird, red-bellied woodpecker, and a black racer. And we did find a few active gopher tortoise burrows in the southern pine stand and along some of the roads. So there does appear to be gopher tortoise populations out there, and there are no known archaeological sites occurring on this property. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Before we get to the Q&A, you indicated we have a representative here.
Yep.
Would you like to speak to the property or make any statements?
This year.
Okay, very good. Kristen, let's start with you.
Yes, could you talk more about the Moran's Prairie Strategic System and kind of put it out on the map?
Yeah, I guess I did not highlight it, but if you go back, Emily, to either the location or the surrounding parcels map, it's more or less, you can see the footprint of this wetland system here. It's generally this area.
The first slide that showed the ACF project area is probably.
Yeah, it doesn't have, we can go back one more or maybe 2 more, Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not reflected in here. It's a little bit bigger than the project area in green, but it's generally this area.
Okay, that's all I'm wondering. Thank you.
Bruce?
Good presentation, no questions.
Paul?
Does that 1469 go up to process 26 up and goes up to Earlton?
Correct, yes.
And then if we go the other way, it goes back to Melrose, right?
Yeah, I think it just dead ends on 219A, which you can take back up to Melrose.
That last photograph that shows the forest there, can you go back to that one? Keep going.
The very last slide.
Yeah. But that one there, on the panel on the right there. That whiteness there, is that sand?
I think it's just pasture grass, I think. I'm not sure why it's looking so grainy. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's pasture grass.
And then
From
the
here, it's
shrubs-
sunlight on grass.
Okay,
The shrubs behind the tree with the hunting stands in it, are those sparkleberries or what are those?
I can't recall, but I would guess that they're just oak saplings, floral and water oak saplings. But I could be wrong.
All right, that's all I have to ask.
TJ.
You mentioned, so there's a dedicated easement through diagonally across, and then the road on the east side, is that a platted
I don't think it's,
road?
this just off the property is a platted road, but the one inside, I could be wrong, but I don't know that it is. There is a culverted crossing. I mean, it's a definitely a usable access road, but I'm not sure if it's platted.
That's it.
I go back to the plat map with the various ownerships. I want to make sure I understand something here. To your knowledge, there between, let's just say the top of the photo to the bottom of the photo, even to the west, almost that whole photographic image, there is no conservation land easement or anything by any agency within that area right there.
That I'm aware of, that is what I understand, yes. The closest conservation land we have is Black Lake Preserve, 1.5 miles to the northeast. And due north is the Bonnet Lake Estates, which is on the active acquisition list. That's also 1.5 miles.
Right.
But yeah, I do not believe there are any
Now
other.
coming out that far, yes, the Loop Forest.
Yeah,
Yes, the
yeah.
Black Lake, okay. Thank you.
Aubrey.
No questions. Thank you.
I also don't have any questions. Anybody?
I just wonder if I can discuss something with the group.
Sure.
We go back to the strategic ecosystem. This is a very small contained strategic ecosystem compared to a lot of the ones that we see that spread along miles and miles and miles. What is the goal of creating that strategic ecosystem? Is it to preserve it? Is it to regulate development or just to recognize its importance?
I think a mix, but somebody else could probably answer that better than I could.
So just want to know how much of that, of the goal of designating a strategic ecosystem is conserving that ecosystem.
Say that again.
How much of the goal of designating a strategic ecosystem is conserving that ecosystem?
In general, for all strategic ecosystems. So the strategic ecosystems are part of the development process within the county. They're designated areas that have been identified as important to protect and that guide the way when there is a development request within a strategic ecosystem area. It guides the way that the landowner or the developer can look at the footprint of their land. And it requires them to set aside more land if their property is within the strategic ecosystem. It requires them to basically protect some of the strategic ecosystem and cluster their development to facilitate that protection. That then would allow them to do development within the strategic ecosystem. So it doesn't prohibit development within the strategic ecosystem. It just adds another layer of sort of buffer calculation and protection within that area. The purpose of the strategic ecosystems overall is to help protect these important natural areas within the county. And so the short answer to your question is that is why the strategic ecosystem overlay exists, is to protect the footprint of those areas which have been identified as important resources within the county. But it doesn't require that it be totally protected.
Okay.
that helps.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And I should have looked at this before I came, but I didn't. Could you describe the Moran's Prairie strategic ecosystem?
I am unfamiliar with it, like you said. It is
Yeah,
a
I've never
pretty
heard of
small
it.
one. This was the first I had heard of it. It does seem to more or less, I'm sure there's a bit of a buffer to that. I should have made a map for that, but it does appear to me from when I was looking on GIS at different levels, that it's basically the footprint with some buffer of this wetland system.
So is it like a wet, dry?
I assume it seems large enough that it probably holds water for a good bit of time, but it is definitely canopy. Prairie is
Okay.
probably not the right word for it. But
Okay, I think you appreciate it.
Anyone else?
I would just say it's isolated and really nothing for pretty far distance that looks like you could build on it. So I'd be pretty leery to reach out and try to do this with really nothing else connected to it, or really not any possibilities in the near future. So that's what my concern would be.
And the only thing I'm even considering is eligibility pool, but only because of it being in the strategic ecosystem, but I agree with BJ. It being small and isolated and not anywhere near anything that we're working on or currently have or in conservation, it seems not particularly suitable. Anyone?
Could you go back to the platted map again?
Comment, or is that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I just want to look at it. No
Okay.
questions.
All right, well,
I was just gonna say, my one more question would be, out of that platted map that we see here. You have an idea of what percent of those platted parcels have a residence or some sort of home site on it?
I don't, I know for sure. I mean, you can see some.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these little ones do. I know for sure the ones here, this had a residence.
Okay.
I mean, you can kind of see one here. I
Okay.
know I turned on the building footprint at some point, but I
Thank you.
can't recall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
William,
It's time.
you asked and you shall receive.
Should I stand here
Wherever you like.
or? I'm Willie Pelosi from Putnam Land Conservancy. We submitted this project. And a few things that struck us that seemed like we were submitting was, water resource protection and the fact that it is within that, partially within the strategic ecosystem, and you have Alachua Creek branches running through it. And, a really nice wetland area. And I know connectivity is a big thing for you all, but looking at the bigger picture, like connectivity is made by a bunch of links in the chain. So there's no other conservation lands in that area, but there's ones, to the north and the northwest, not too far away. So it's could help build a corridor to connect to the larger project areas that are underway. And also, there seems like there could be, without nearby conservation lands, it might be a plus for the local community and build support for the Alachua County Forever program from constituents who may not be near conserved lands. It might be important to people to buy into the program in the future. And also seems like there might be good recreation potential here, since it is kind of a disturbed site in many areas. It might lend itself to some more some passive and a little more active like recreation, like maybe bike trails and things. So yeah, that was our thinking behind nominating it. Any questions for me?
I've got one. The adjacent properties to the west, Polk Enterprises.
Mhm.
Have you gotten in contact with them? Do you have a status on that? Because I could see this property getting substantial lift if there was at least interest by that landowner.
No, if I'm not, I have not had contact with them, but is that one that's on the project list?
Not our list. I don't think we have.
The map, it didn't seem to me there was.
It's the ACF project area, which just identifies potential parcels that we would be interested in. It does not.
Okay,
imply
okay,
that
I
we
was
have-
misunderstood.
Yeah.
We would be happy to reach out to them.
Also to the south, to the Thomas Jewel.
Agreed, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it could be a good, jumping off point, this property. We're happy to reach out to the adjacent landowners.
All right, well, there's no such thing as, unless the landowner withdraws their application. There's no such thing as being rejected. It would just be the board failed to make a motion. So, if there is any successful contact with those adjacent landowners, we'd be happy to hear about it and perhaps entertain this site again, unless I'm speaking prematurely. I haven't heard a motion yet, but
I'm interested in exploring eligibility. I'm not sure. But not priority.
I have a question about. Everything is relative, like. There's probably one parcel that's the best for our program. And then there's a bunch of them that are way down the list, like absolute losers. What I'm wanting to know is, in general, where do we stand with respect to how much money we've got to spend? And how many parcels of high quality are on our list of things that we want to get? It's like, are we, like, and clearly over the next 30 or 40 years, there's going to be less and less options to buy pieces of land. So it might be like 30 years from now, one of the little tiny parcels down there might be the best thing we can get. One, like a 5-acre block surrounded by high rises or something. So just in general, where are we? The Titanic is sinking, how sunken?
Andy, would you like to field that?
Sure.
That's part of your presentation, right?
That was part of the presentation that I previewed for this board last month, but for those that didn't have the opportunity to see it, basically, the county is actively working to protect conservation land. The minimum goal that we have established within the county is currently based on the federal and really global 30 by 30 initiative to protect 30% of the land and water globally, but in this case within Alachua County by the year 2030. So that's kind of where we're looking as the minimum target. Within that target, we definitely have corridors, and they are based on both the Alachua County Forever project areas, but also on the Florida Ecological Greenways Network. So we have corridors that have been identified as the higher priority corridors because they have a greater likelihood of being able to be assembled, and they overlap with broader regional conservation goals. That all being said, we have some very big target properties that we have hopes of being able to acquire, but many of them are long-term projects. Many of the properties that you have seen are long-term projects. Some of them, it may take us 15 years to get a contract on a property that we keep working on because it's in a really key location. Some of them we can move much more quickly on. A lot of that comes down to willing landowner. Like, how willing is the landowner to work with the program at the snapshot in time when we have funding and we're able to work with them? And then in that framework of willing landowner and whether the property has an equivalent value in the eyes of both this board, the Board of County Commissioners, and our staff, we prioritize what we're able to work on now, that we have a willing landowner now, that we're able to come to an agreement on a price now on. So we are working on smaller properties right now, while at the same time we have our eyes set on 4,000 acre, 7,000 acre properties. So it's a constant mix. Those really big properties, those are obviously big goals for us when they fall within these key corridor areas. But sometimes it's a little harder to get to that willing landowner point on these
Yeah.
really big properties.
Well, my only fear is that if we wait for the really good ones, there may not be anything.
So,
So,
just for, yeah, general consideration, there are currently 40,000 acres on the active acquisition list. So that's when the LCB puts a property on the priority pool, staff then takes those properties to the Board of County Commissioners to consider for inclusion on the active acquisition list. But some of that 40,000 acres are properties that have been on the active acquisition list since 2003, or since 2012, or since 2021. You know, they've been added at different times. So some of them are more active than others. Because we never take anything off the active acquisition list unless the landowner says. so.
supposing you could buy them, all of them right now, at 40,000 acres, how much would that use up the next 10 years prospective revenue?
All of it,
All of it.
yeah.
Okay.
You know, prices vary, but
Yeah.
approximately based on our averages, it likely would be all of
Okay.
it. Yeah. You know, but then I'm very confident that some of those properties we won't be able to work on. So it shouldn't be looked at as an impediment to adding things to the eligibility pool or the priority pool, because the other factor that's at play that you as a board see some of, you see more than any other citizens do, is the role that staff plays in identifying the current priorities and the things that we have current opportunities on. So our staff are always looking at, among those active acquisition list properties, which ones are the highest priority ecologically in terms of contributing to our mission, combined with the highest opportunity of active landowner willingness.
It seems like it would give you the most degrees of freedom as county staff expert if we put a lot of stuff on the priority pool. And then you could say, well, it's on there, but there's something better. So,
Yeah, as long as it meets the mission, as long as it's, yeah, so there could be a taking it one step further from what you're saying. If you all just decided anything that comes to us, we're gonna put on the list.
what would be the disadvantage of that?
We could be receiving pressure to move forward on properties that really aren't a match for the mission.
Pressure from,
Outside sources that, you know, in the framework that we work within could push us towards focus on properties that might not otherwise be the ones we would independently prioritize as much. So the role for the Land Conservation Board is if a property meets the mission, it meets the basically minimum criteria of the mission of the program, then it is considered eligible for the program. And so that's then a candidate for the eligibility pool. If a property then also has features that make it a higher priority in the eyes of you as a board, then it's your choice collectively to determine whether or not it moves forward onto the priority pool. And then anything that you place on the priority pool, we will present to the Board of County Commissioners for inclusion on the active acquisition list. After that step, you know, we, as you all may be aware, we have properties we're actively negotiating on, actively writing conservation easement deeds on. So then it just comes down to a staff workload capacity sort of question. We work through the ones that we're actively working on, and we try and add new ones into the process as staff capacity allows, and as our contractors' capacity, our closing agent, our surveyors, as their capacity allows. And we base our selection for the next property that we're going to move actively forward on staff knowledge of what's on the active acquisition list that we have a currently engaged, active and interested landowner for, that we determine is of the highest priority based on its ecological values, and potentially also based on the more immediate threat of sale to a non-conservation landowner. So we try to be aware of that influence as well, that pressure as well.
Andy, acquisition also includes easement.
It does. So, yeah, we're actively working right now on fee simple and on easements.
The only thing I'd add is proximity to pre-owned property. If it's an in-holding, even though it's just 40 acres, it is immediately put up there. And if it's immediately adjacent and it continues a corridor effort, that absolutely, all things being equal, it will prioritize it. So proximity is pretty important.
Yeah. In terms of the staff assessment, absolutely.
Yeah,
And your evaluation as well.
yeah. Well, thank you, that would like.
Does that help? Okay.
Melissa.
I have a question for Ryan, or I'm assuming you did the scoring.
Mhm.
Can you just speak to when you score for the social and human values? So I'm thinking about the score for 2 for compatible resource-based recreation is appropriate.
Which number is that?
It is.
Specifically,
Um,
I4A.
hey, that's the one. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
curious if there's a. Is it based really on getting out there and seeing what's available, knowing what access is like, thinking just from your experience of opening reserves to the public?
Yeah, so some of it is physical public access, so this is a public road, so that's a plus. Some of it is what kind of users could be expected to want to use this, and how much could they use the property. If it's a really small property and we have to invest a lot of money into the infrastructure of a trailhead and a parking lot, and they're gonna get a 1/4 mile hike out of it, that plays into it, versus if it's several thousand acres and they can, spend all day out there, that's a factor. I could try to pull out our other scoring criteria and see if there's anything else in there that I'm missing, but that's what comes to my mind at the moment for scoring with that one.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. Just wanted to speak to that a little bit.
If it's appropriate for multiple users, you could paddle and ride a horse and ride a mountain bike and hike, that's a big
That's
one.
ideal.
That creek a little too dry.
Any other Q&A? All right, thank you very much. Thank you. We are now on to the Wacolusa Creek Flatwoods Bury project. Ownership.
Yep.
All right, so my name is Emily again, and I'll be presenting the second property for you tonight. Also closest in relation to the Alachua Creek Flatwoods project area. So the Bury property, like Ryan's, is not in the Alachua Creek Flatwoods project area, but it is directly adjacent to parcels that are within the project area, which again scored a 7.87 of 9.44. The property itself scored a 6.07 of 10. And it is a little under 40 acres, so 39.24. It is one parcel under one ownership. No significant buildings on site. Infrastructure was a small shed and other hunting infrastructure. The parcel is primarily used for hunting recreation. Just in total values, again, taken from what's currently listed on the property appraiser website, are the same at $196,200, which comes out to about $5,000 an acre. We do not have an asking price for the property. The landowner is not in a rush to sell the property. He is aware of our program and likes it, but wants to keep options on the table. So he's nominated it for both consideration as a fee simple and as a conservation easement. So as far as where we are in the world, we're in kind of the southeast quadrant of the county. The Bury parcel is in red, so we're south of State Road 20, west of Hawthorne. And the property does have road frontage on its northern boundary on County Road 2082. So this property is directly connected to property that we already own and manage. So in the Pfeiffer Flatwoods Preserve Addition properties, actually on 3 sides. So this was the original Pfeiffer Additions parcel that we owned, and actually we have a small access here just to the west as well. And then more recently, at the end of the year, we acquired the brown parcels that contributed greatly to the acreage in the Pfeiffer additions tract. So this property is nestled right into that and would provide more road frontage on County Road 2082. Surrounding that, we are also directly connected to the Georgia Pacific Alachua conservation easements, which is all of this around, as well as the Alachua Wildlife Conservation Area, both managed by the Water Management District. So zooming in on the parcel, you can see the road frontage on County Road 82, as well as a little bit better our access onto Pfeiffer additions. This property is primarily composed of a hardwood forest, successional hardwood forest, and pine plantation. You can see a lot of the pine plantation a little bit up in the northwest corner, as well as going down the west side, and the bulk of it is kind of in the southern portion of the property. So it's all forested currently, though in its history, looking back at aerials, the property was almost entirely cleared between the mid 1960s and mid 1970s, basically everything. And then looks like it was replanted with pines at that time, and the upland areas were again reharvested in 2004, 2005 timeframe and replanted with loblolly. Looking at kind of the footprints, there's a couple of little wetlands on the property that we'll go into a little bit further in the presentation, kind of a basin swamp up in this area, which based on the kind of harvest footprint back in the 1960s, it looks like that kind of expanded more throughout the middle of the property, but we didn't quite see as much of that footprint as intact on the property today. And there's also another footprint swamp down here. There's also a portion of Little Montioka Creek that runs through the northeast corner of the property. So I've got a little bit more on the parcel ownership map here. I didn't label everybody's names. Most of the parcels, since we're still pretty connected to lands that we already own and other significant conservation lands in the area. I've got additionally in the active acquisition list properties in red. So this is the brown parcels. Some of these were a part of the original Brown nomination with that, but got carved out of the acquisition when we actually bought the property. So those are still on the active acquisition list, but weren't acquired. This is another landowner that's not actively being worked on at the moment, but has been put on historically. And the red was anything that has been previously nominated to our program, just to have that up there as well. So smaller land ownerships around. This parcel came up for sale a year or so ago, but was purchased relatively quickly before we had time to jump on it. Now has a new mobile home on it. So we're not thinking that one's in play at the moment. And the other one that's had some significant traction and presentation to you all in the past, this set of parcels here is the Magnesia Springs property, which has come to the board a number of times in the past. And it's a developed spring, unclear whether it still has any flow or significant flow to it. Really developed area, and that also sold recently within the last year for over $600,000. But it has also never made it past the nomination phase with you all and has been presented to this board at least twice. So soil map, I've added an extra L on soils map, but we've got a mixture of soil drainages on the property, from moderately well drained on the northwest and west side of the property, going towards somewhat poorly drained and very poorly drained on this side. Generally, the elevation of the property slopes downward from west to east as you're moving towards this wetland system on the brown track. So going into what the property actually looks like. So this is the northeast corner looking west down County Road 2082. So this is all the road frontage that's on the property. And this gate is down to the other corner. So down at the northwest corner, this is the access onto the property, and it is directly adjacent to our access onto the current Pfeiffer additions. So moving into wetlands on the property, this is a picture of the basin swamp footprint that is still wet and intact on the property that we saw. Mixture of hardwoods, some tupelo probably, but also a lot of sweet gum and red maple. Probably, I would say in fair condition. But around that, we did notice a lot of other kind of depressional areas. Some had water, some did not, but had vegetation in them or water lines that would indicate that these areas do become wetter and or stay wetter during other parts of the year. So more wetland type vegetation, but we're not wet at the time. The site was very dry when we went out to visit, so that was probably biasing our view of it a little bit. But historically, I think the basin swamp footprint was probably a little bit larger than what it kind of is today. Potentially due to site alteration over time, but hard to fully say. So moving down, this is that floodplain swamp that's in the southeast corner of the property. This was a lovely little wetlands down here, hardwood dominated, not with cypress, but tupelo and other hardwoods and a mixture of palms as well on these kind of elevated grassy patches throughout. We weren't able to really get into this floodplain system, but it directly connects to hydrologically and a little bit physically to the wetland system outside of the property on the brown parcels, which is in the Lake Wakarusa outstanding Florida waterway and that hardwood floodplain swamp system. Additionally, here's some pictures of Little Wantioka Creek that runs through the property. It is a tributary of Wakarusa Creek, which flows into Lake Wakarusa to the southeast. And it was a lovely little creek system. Did not look like it had been channelized at all. It still had a nice winding contour through the property. And did have more water than Ryan's Creek had in it, though not a ton in all places. So this is just one more view of the creek system. It does cut across the boundary between the Bury property and the brown parcels to the east, which we already own. And so this fence line goes across and it shows that the boundary. So this is all part of the brown tract, which we acquired more recently. And this side is on the Bury property. So moving upward in elevation, we had kind of a music or a hydro to music hammock hardwood type system, somewhat successional in good to fair condition. So it was very open in the understory, very grassy. I'm not 100% sure what type of grass it was specifically, perhaps a dicanthelium witchgrass. It's a type of grass that I typically see ecotonally transitioning into much more wet habitats, indicative that the site might be much wetter during times of the year that not right now. So hardwood diversity on the site, definitely a lot of the typical species, live laurel, water oaks, the mature ones of those, but also other hardwoods, including pignut hickory, American holly, American hornbeam, southern magnolias, cherries, and other bays as well. Also in places we had some very mature and much older loblolly pines, as well as a mixture of slash pines. So we've got Jesse Network for scale and Chrisman for scale. You can see the size of those trees compared to the other trees that are on the property that were clearly not harvested during the time that other things were harvested on the site, also potentially indicating that the site is or was wetter, so that didn't allow for that harvest. Moving upland into the pine plantation ecosystem, this is kind of a representative picture of the character of a lot of it. Much of it was very open, easily walkable, not a ton of ground cover diversity, but grassy in patches and some areas where there were thicker, denser shrubbier places with gallberry and lyonia and palms. So here's more of that pine stand, again, fairly open. The pines, again, are about 20 or so years old, fairly skinny. It could do with a thinning, would probably help them out, and burning as well would help the understory. So some native diversity in the ground cover, but not an overwhelming abundance of different things. But one of the things we did find in the southern part of the property were a couple of muckernut hickories, potentially indicative of more of an upland hardwood community or tending towards more of a sandhill community in its past history. There was also a couple of different species of blueberry, sparkleberry, and a number of other common species you would find in the understory. And one other unique feature we found on the property was in the southern parts of the pine plantation, there was an area where there was an abundance of coontie in the understory, which we typically see occasionally, but not in the number that we saw it out there. This site. As far as infrastructure goes, this is the shed I mentioned earlier, and other infrastructure on the property is really mostly related to the recreational hunting that was going on. So a lot of feeders, tree stands, and a lot of blinds that look like this. As far as other debris on the site, not associated with the current recreational use, there was some scattered historic debris, but nothing overwhelming. As far as invasive plants go, also not hugely represented on the site. We did see 3 different species. Japanese climbing fern, sparsely represented in the northern pine stand. We didn't see it in the southern one, not saying that it's not there. We have 1 camphor tree and a little bit of Kogan grass along the northern boundary along County Road 2082. But we also did see a fair amount of evidence of recent feral hog activity on the property, and the landowner also confirmed that he's seen there. The one other kind of interesting feature of the property that I'll mention, so we had some unique topographical things on the northern boundary of the property. A lot of difference on like mounding of soil and exposed lime rock. Did not look like it was a natural feature of the property based on how it was laid out. And also in talking to the landowner, we think a lot of this was done during when County Road 2082 was built to supplement that road. But still added a unique feature of the site. We just don't think it was a natural one. There was 1 pocket over in this area that was more sinkhole looking in nature, but because it was associated with all this, I'm not entirely sure that it was a sinkhole or if it wasn't just digging that happened in association with this to get more lime rock for the road. Well, I'd be kind of see how steep the embankments are. Jesse at the bottom and how high that is. It's hard to kind of get a sense of the elevation, but there were some definite like 5-6 foot decreases, but very, very sharply up on that. So as far as archaeological sites, none recorded on the property, no eagle's nest recorded on the property. We did see and hear a number of bird species while we were out there, and the landowner reported seeing lots of deer and turkey and non-venomous snakes, also bobcats and bear have visited the property, and he has seen gopher tortoises on the southern boundary of the property, but he's not aware of any active burrows that he's seen on his side. So maybe more associated with the part we already own, but he has seen them wandering around. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to transfer them to you.
Thank you, Emily. Very good, thorough job. We're gonna go counterclockwise this time. So Aubrey, you're up.
Very great. No questions from me.
Does the easement, go to the picture of the easement.
The access to
Yeah.
Piper Industries,
Yeah,
this one.
that's the easement to Piper.
Yeah, I think we own
Yeah, that's a fee strip.
What was that?
we own that access.
Okay, it's owned access, okay, very good.
Yep.
That, no further question.
Yeah, and this was the parcel that came up for sale and now has a house for a mobile home on it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
PJ. You can come back around.
Yeah.
Old man.
Lost my train.
Paul?
The missing 3/4 of an acre, usually things are 40 acres, this is like 39.
It's
40.
probably around 40. That's just what it had listed on the property appraiser website. A survey would tell us the definitive acreage. So
Depending on where the quarter section line is, that access road may have originally been part of this 40.
Okay. Then the paved road that goes north from there is straight north from there up to 20. What's that little town there at the junction there? The other map actually shows the road.
Grove Park.
Is that Grove Park?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And then, the 2080. The 2082 stops being paved, right, at that. place,
Yes, I
right?
believe
It
it's.
becomes dirt road
It's dirt
off to
road.
the left,
Mhm.
and then is that all timber company land beyond when you go another mile down the dirt road?
There's a conservation, the Wapaloosa conservation easements. So all of this is part of the Georgia Pacific Wapaloosa Conservation easement. I believe it's managed with the Water Management District. So
Yeah.
it might be timberland, but it's
It's
also
Weyerhaeuser.
Weyerhaeuser's.
Yeah.
Those conservation easements with the timber company, are they pretty secure in terms of the future?
Yeah, so they're perpetual. It's St. John's District is the easement grantee and manager.
In the Lackawanna Wildlife Conservation Area, what's the status of that? Is that,
I think
is that
that's
what we're
also,
talking about?
That is the Weyerhaeuser property.
And does that have a conservation easement on it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I guess that's my question.
Melissa,
Thank you for your presentation. I have another scoring question. So category 2, economic and acquisition issues. B, whether the overall resource value justifies the potential cost of acquisition. Just know on the one that we just talked about, it was actually higher. So I'm just curious if you could talk through your process of how you score that as staff.
let's see. For that one, I think I took into account that there weren't. Yeah. This one, I think, because it was also potentially going to be a CE. I think played into it, so
This is, can I answer it for you? This is based on the property appraiser value and the acreage. It's a mathematical
yeah,
calculation.
Okay.
It's a preset scoring. Wherever the property, wherever that math puts you per acre, that assigns the score for that question.
Okay, so this one's auto tabulated.
Mhm.
Not auto, but. yeah.
Well,
If
you would be your math. But it's not a observational subjective.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all.
Bruce,
No questions.
Kristen,
When was the Pfeiffer Flatwoods Preserve additions added?
The original one
Or the second one, the additions, the one to the south of this property?
I don't know what the Roberts.
Just a general.
I acquired it, so it was a while ago.
Okay.
Last year,
What was?
this side.
That
Okay.
was,
That was just purchased.
I'm gonna say that was 2006 or 2007.
And no other questions.
BJ,
Yeah, so the landowner nominated this and it's not on the market, they just
It's not
saw
a
our
market.
program and.
Yeah, I think talked to Kevin or another one of our staff members when we were out looking at the Brown parcels. So he actively hunts the property. It's been in his family for a number of years. Likes to be able to have that recreational use, but also really likes our program and understands the value of what we do. So was interested in kind of seeing how it worked and what options he might have with our program, should he decide to sell, or if a conservation easement would work for what his plans are for the property. He said he doesn't plan to develop it or do anything else other than hunt on it. He doesn't live in the area, so it's kind of a recreational opportunity for him to come up here and be able to utilize it.
thank you. Sir, do we have anybody in the audience who came to speak to this?
And I say you have the.
Yeah.
Mr.
So,
Glenn. So you can read it or I can. We got an email submission person. Sure.
Come on up, Willie.
Oh, yeah, I'm Willie Logan from Putnam Land Conservancy. And personal friend of some of the neighboring property owners, Jeff Glenn and Sam First. So first, me, as a citizen, I would support this project. It looks great. Especially, seems like y'all are happy with it. So comments by Jeff Glenn and Sam Burst, owners of 14815 County Road 2082. So they're just like one parcel away next to that mobile home parcel, I think. to the west of the property. And these are all their comments that I'm gonna read. We wholeheartedly support the acquisition of the Bury property by Alachua County. It will further tie together the recent ground purchase by the county to Pfeiffer Flatwoods additions, secure the area from further development, and secure the area from further development. We think that a fee simple acquisition would be preferable so that the county can manage similarly and simultaneously with the adjacent county owned parcels. This is the last undeveloped private parcel on County Road 2082, west of 152nd Street in Grove Park. And it would be a critical piece of acquisition to protect the Lochloosa Creek watershed. From a recreational standpoint, the Bury addition would allow the county to create a public access trailhead for the public to recreate on the combined Bury, Brown, and Pfeiffer properties. There is so much potential for recreation on these combined properties, and a roadside trailhead will alleviate the concerns I've heard from the county staff about a trailhead down the existing long driveway into the Pfeiffer additions property. So I guess that's the access easement he's talking about. I'd be willing to donate my time as a professional trail manager, builder, and designer to the county should they move forward with an eventual access plan. Just an aside, Jeff Glenn works for the Florida Trail Association. So he really knows his trails. As far as feral hogs are concerned, we have never seen hogs or signs of hogs on our land very near to the Bury property. We regularly see eagles directly overhead in this area and would guess that there are indeed nests within 1 mile of this property. I want to commend Alachua County on doing an amazing job with land management and conservation acquisition work in this area. Recent burns have been very well planned and executed, and we would love to focus. We love the focus on eastern Alachua County as a place where conservation lands will forever be part of the landscape. So those are the comments.
Thank you, Willie.
You're welcome.
Please tell Jeff I said hi.
I will text him as soon as the vote's made. Just an aside, y'all mentioned Magnesia Springs. It is flowing considerably these days.
We
Just,
weren't sure. The only data we had was from an older evaluation.
yeah, it's definitely flowing and on the
Right.
water.
Emily, why is the green leaf patch red over on that west
Because
side?
it's also been this piece was also nominated to the program at one point in time. So that's
It's
what,
already concerned, it's already got a CE on it.
yep, but
It's a
It-
mapping.
it's a mapping,
okay, gotcha.
yeah, so even it could have been nominated before the CE was on it,
Gotcha.
like way back when the program started with all the bulk nominations that came through. I could look back at its history, but
Okay.
just, it was nominated at some point in time.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I motion to put the Bury property on the eligibility pool.
I'll second that.
Who seconded? Okay.
The motion is to put the Lochloosa Creek Flatwoods Bury property on the eligibility pool. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion passes.
I motion to put the Bury property on the priority.
I'll second that.
Motion is Lochloosa Creek Flatwoods Bury property on the priority pool. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Excellent. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Was that comment about the trailhead being a problem down the
Just
road
for
through?
like future, like a lot of times we like to have trailheads like right
Yeah,
along the roadway.
for visibility.
For visibility and vandalism
Safety,
issues
yeah.
and safety and things like that. So if we acquired it fee simple, this is a much drier, or has a drier pocket than Brown. So that would be a potential recreational opportunity there if we acquired it fee simple.
Excellent, thank you.
But
Very good.
other opportunities may also exist. We are looking into.
All right. That was an interesting contrast there. All right, old business. Or much discussed workshop discussion. So I think what we want to do here is just quickly go through, in addition to picking a date, see if there's any additional thoughts about discussion topics, or if what's been made in this bullet list is sufficient for everybody.
Or if you even want all of those. or
True,
some of the
yeah.
things that-
We could trim it if we want.
Yeah, definitely a flexible list. It was something that had just come up that we've made in discussion with several people. As options for things that could be some discussion at a workshop.
Additional topic, so instead of trimming the list, I'm expanding it. But I think it would be nice, I'm always just curious on the criteria ranking. And, maybe we could go through a project that has already been closed on, and, you could just let us go what goes into each of those lines. Because I know it's a big chunk of time to spend in it, and it's not something that we necessarily dive into in the presentations, and so I would find value in understanding that with a greater level of detail.
I like that.
Would the conservation easements also include agricultural easements? No, separate, because I want to learn about. Because that's a new.
About easements in general. or
Agricultural.
the Potential agricultural protection program that's
Yeah.
still under development.
So I'll talk about it now, talk about it later.
We can talk a little bit, but there won't be
Okay.
much, yeah.
And that's gonna start coming up a lot, right? And it's gonna be two very different things we're looking at, and
I got a phone
start
call
getting our
today.
brain thinking about what's important, and,
Those are gonna be the way.
that's gonna, put some real mix in.
It does, and there definitely is a component of the discussion that involves constituting a separate board, separate
Yeah.
citizen board, a separate scoring process. And potentially even isolating a separate portion of the funding.
Okay, so we're working through all that now.
That, yeah, that's where it is now, is a study being ordered by a consultant or nonprofit to identify soil priority areas for protection and potentially like crop areas for protection, to create a scoring matrix similar to the one that Melissa just asked for clarification on our process. At the very beginning of the Alachua County Forever program, the predecessor to the Land Conservation Board, the LCAC, went through the process of establishing what the criteria were, how we would score properties, what the project areas were. All of those things were like what's now sort of the behind the scenes in the past part of creating this program. Some components of that process will be undergone for this agricultural protection program, but none of the steps have been taken yet. I think it's certainly our hope as staff that it doesn't end up being a separate ask for you as a board. And additionally, that whether through hiring of a consultant or contractor, or hiring a new staff person, that someone with agricultural expertise gets pulled into the process in a more formalized way, because that is not the expertise of any of our staff. And I think maybe with the exception of Paul, maybe no one at the table as well. So
What's the goal of that program? Would you say?
So the goal would be to heighten the focus on protecting agricultural lands, aligned towards those lands, playing a role in strengthening the corridors that this program is already working on, while simultaneously increasing focus on land protection in the western side of the county for water recharge purposes, but also to some degree for local food production considerations.
About non-local food,
Producing food for non-local
like
citizens.
real farming, like farming peanuts and soybeans and.
That is potentially part of it as well. So it is an infant idea without any real parameters fleshed out at this point. So it's hard to say precisely what shape it would take, but there is definitely an interest in a component of it being for local food production
Ranking.
protection, and yeah, that could be part of the ranking. And a component of it to use that program to strengthen the efforts of this program. Kind of like a really great example would be the Hitchcock Conservation Easement. That's a conservation easement that really hits this program's mission as well. If that came to us at the time when we had a more defined agriculture protection program, it potentially could have been funded by either. Then we more recently had like a year and a half ago, had the Davis farm properties that were also up near Mill Creek, if you recall those. Those were stronger candidates for the agricultural protection program because of the nature of the site and the active uses of the site and the intent of the landowners. But they do also support this program. So they would like strengthen the efforts of the ACF program, but have more of an intentional focus on active farming and preserving the rights of those active farmers. Currently, the way that the ACF program approaches conservation easements is we ask for a higher degree of lift from the landowner in terms of the restrictions that are placed on their property or that they grant to us through our purchase of the conservation easement. We require more than them just giving the development rights up. We require preservation areas, we require, limitations on nutrient loading through their whatever practices, through fertilizer application or other practices. We have extra asks in order to become part of the conservation easement family of Alachua County forever. And I think this agricultural easement program would probably be more aligned with some of the state or federal agricultural easements in that it might not have the same expectation of lift that the ACF conservation easements have.
And the chopping up of the money between the two programs, how's that gonna be done?
It may or may not even happen. So that's going to be through board direction, Board of County Commissioners direction. And that is still an unknown piece of this. The first step is completing the study and developing the priorities for the agricultural protection program. That has not yet been done. At the time that gets done, that information would be brought back to the Board of County Commissioners, and they would then need to decide if they want it to just be a parallel program without any funding division, or if they want a clear funding division.
Are you speculating that this could be 5 years from now, 2 years from now?
Our original estimate was year 1 and 2 of this surtax cycle would be laying out the process for the agricultural protection program, and that year 3 would be the very first year we could see an easement being purchased through that program.
You think you'll be tasked with developing that framework? Basically, if it becomes morphs into a secondary program, I mean, would your group likely would drive the bus on creating that framework?
We think that there will be some assignments to our program, and we are unsure of how broad those assignments will end up being.
I think we can probably take a bit of an active role in advising the board about what we'd like to see happen.
Yeah, I mean, even as a citizen, I'd like to get engaged because I wouldn't want an open checkbook. I'd like it divided and,
Yeah, so I attended the county commission meeting.
Sure you did.
Yeah,
Thank you
and
for being there.
Yeah, and I jumped, if you read the ordinance for the wild spaces, public spaces program, the agricultural easements still has to meet the needs of preserving natural resources and water resources protection. So it's not just, we want to save this because we want to grow watermelons in Alachua County. It does have to have that portion of it.
But Andy's comment about.
Oh, yeah,
Maybe
there's-
political
right,
headwinds
yeah.
that aren't gonna, that.
No, I
farmers
absolutely
like
agree.
The ACF program restrictions, we want a little looser kind of.
There's going to be a lot of
It will be a different
Yeah.
program, like the criteria will be different.
It's a worry that our money might disappear into that. Like a pile of our money. Not just a little bit, that's my worry. It might erode the wild spaces.
Without question, some portion of the 80% of the wild spaces surtax, the county's receipt of the 80. The wild spaces surtax, 80% of that is going to. Fight an emergency. Is 80% of that is going to the conservation lands umbrella program. Which includes the ACF program and will include this agricultural protection program. So no matter what, some of that funding is going to that program, unless the program never grows into a living, functioning program. The amount is the question that's very much unanswered probably at this.
That is whether we should try to make it not ever evolving.
But you'll have political pressure from the commission. There's strong support for the
But
commission.
those are the lands that we may have, the county may have to just really. Those will not be the only lands that were named, for,
Yeah.
It's also for growth management too. It can be used for growth management.
I will say that, again, that 30 initiative that we are using as a target, as our minimum target. All of the considerations around that target include agricultural land protection. Even the Florida Wildlife Corridor, the considerations of, having a real chance to assemble that includes agricultural land protection. In most of that case, it's those very large cattle ranches in South Central Florida, but I think we're at a point where some part of that has to be a real part of the equation. It's how much of the some part. And certainly our hope is that we would continue to be the managing office for all of that funding. And that there would be additional staff added to our office that would work on those easements in concert with our staff working on traditional conservation lands to ensure that overall program priorities are still met in a way that is directed.
Let me take that off the list because we just went over it.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, some of the conversation, the pros and cons of an ag component, we can maybe table for the actual workshop.
Yeah,
I do have one other related question that I also hope doesn't launch into a conversation. Do we have any idea what percentage of the funds are gonna go to the county for the active recreation program and the timeframe and the determination?
you mean between county parks and county and ACF? Or you mean prior to the disperse?
So-
What do you, yeah.
My understanding is that like prior iterations of the program, where each of the municipalities got their allocation, the county was also going to get an allocation for non-conservation land acquisitions, the ball field type acquisitions. Do we know what that's gonna look like yet? How much?
So. There's no way for it to not be a conversation, but so the way that it works is the surtax is collected by the state. The state then disperses it to the county in a pre-cut up manner. And that pre-cut up manner is based on population base. So it's dispersed to each of the municipalities in the county based on their population and the unincorporated area of the county, which is us.
So that's the basic difference.
That's the, well,
Unincorporated county is now included in that cut.
so that's the first step in dispersal. The money we always talk about is just the county portion of that dispersal. So simultaneously, there's active park, mostly it's being used for active park money being sent directly to the municipalities. The money that's sent directly to the unincorporated parts of the county is what we talk about as the total county budget. of that total county budget. This is later on the agenda, but the commission did move to allocate 80% of that total county budget to the conservation lands program and 20% to the active parks program for implementation of the active parks master plan, which does include in it identified locations for purchase of new county park lands. So part of their master plan process laid out where there were gaps, service gaps in the active parks within the county.
Okay,
The commission has directed the Parks and Open Space Department to come back with revisions and recommendations on how they are identifying those service gaps. So there's still a little bit of work to be done on how the active parks program may implement the use of their 20%. But any land acquisition, unless the commission changes their motion, because this is just a motion. So unless the commission were to change the motion, that percent for parks and open space will remain at 20%. And the percent for conservation lands will remain at 80%.
Okay.
And they are allowed to buy land with their 20%.
And the 80% is lands like this board, but then now is gonna be also the farmland
The
protection.
ag component, yes.
Yep.
And it also includes the building, our field support and office
Oh,
building.
yeah, that they put that in their motion. So that was
Yeah.
good news. Yeah.
The potential to hire term limited staff for management of the, or really the onboarding.
Is that new? And
Staff is new
payment coming out of the budget, that's new.
out of the wild spaces surtax. Yeah,
The city doesn't.
all right. Well, I don't want to belabor this too much, so. Is there anything on this list that anybody would like to see? Taken off, or anything in addition to what Melissa has offered up, added to it?
I think all the topics are great. They can be smaller or larger depending on the weight of the topic.
I think
So
we're gonna go with the flow with this
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, and see where it goes. All right, well, hearing none. Are we interested in actually nailing down a date?
And a potential discussion of how much time
Yeah.
during whatever date we choose. You guys want to be in a workshop. How many hours of the day are you interested in participating?
Our standard meeting is what, hour and a half to 2 hours? So I don't know how much beyond that people have an interest in. And we will be, in all likelihood, unless there's a convenient holiday during the week, we will be borrowing from staff's vacation weekend time to contribute to this, so we should be mindful of that as well.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
April 1st is the spring celebration for the School of Forestry, Fisheries and Geomatic Sciences at the Austin Curie. And that's an annual event, it's a big event.
Okay,
That occurs on April the 1st.
all right, so I think at least you're out on that
I would be
one.
out.
Jason, I would also be out.
Okay,
on the first.
all right, so that's enough. I think that rules out that date.
also, just looking, when we just came up with these dates, I didn't probably really perceive that the 9th is Easter Sunday. And so that may make the 8th, 9th not so good for some folks.
15.
I'm fine with the 8th.
I'm also fine with it, but
Are we thinking like a
We,
9 to 12 or 9 to 11, that people bring some muffins
Yeah.
and coffee? kind of
My-
thing?
my gut is 2 hours is not gonna be adequate.
If you want to cover all of these.
If you wanna cover all these, yeah, and allow for discussion.
We
Yeah.
can talk about.
But I didn't cap the 3, so you guys.
Well, So what do you think? What was your suggestion?
I mean, I was gonna say 4,
Yeah, that
but,
seems, we can always go shorter, right?
3 to 4, yeah, somewhere in there,
yeah. I mean,
especially.
Start time. 8 eight-ish, 8 or 9-ish, or what do you think? Going there.
Yeah, I think so.
I say, what does Linwood County staff, it's your weekend.
It's right, it's everyone's weekend. I,
How about 9 to noon? And then if we want, we can all go grab lunch somewhere afterwards. And our growling stomachs will
Yeah.
end the meeting for us. How about that?
create a required ending.
Yeah.
On the 8th. I mean, we can offer up other dates too. Those are just 2 that we picked. So if someone is concerned about that weekend,
And did we determine a location?
not yet. We've been kind of waiting for the time and the date so that we could actually seek out. This is a possibility. We are definitely in that position of needing to make sure it is accessible to the public. The other one, you all expressed a desire for it to be more central in downtown, so we don't know yet.
Okay,
It'll
And,
be
for-
in the county.
I'll put in an option, the Hogtown Headwaters has a really nice building, with a meeting room there.
Yeah, if we have a date, we'll start pursuing the
all right.
location.
Well, unless.
Do we need a
somebody-
vote on that or,
Sure, let's do that.
okay,
Sounds like we have a nomination for April 8th. Approximately 9 to 12.
TBD location.
I don't know that we need a vote.
Okay,
This is silly.
but that's, I just
yeah.
want to put it in the minutes
Yeah,
that this is
yeah.
what we agreed upon. Okay, good.
Cool for everybody? All right, Tentative.
Can I make a suggestion?
Consensus.
no.
Since Wayne, Mark, and Kate are not, and Jason are all not here. If the 15th is also, and I don't even know amongst us if it's a possibility, but if that is a possibility, maybe we can send out a doodle poll.
Yeah.
And see if one is slightly better, for more members.
I can't do the 15th, but those 4 people might be able to,
Yeah,
so.
I can't do the 15th either.
Doodle poll is still probably a good idea, or at the very least, email them and
Yeah.
see if the 8th is okay for them.
Okay, yep.
So tentatively, we have this scheduled.
Okay,
Mhm.
so tentative.
All right,
Yep.
back to the agenda.
I would like to suggest that we remove brief program overview. As I feel it falls underneath the following larger bullet. And all those things that are happening in there. That feels like one
Yeah.
talk to me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
I also feel as though the corridors component could just be this is just an ordering thing at this point. That could just be a sub bullet underneath that for the larger network of conservation outside the county. Let's talk about corridors and overlap there.
Well, as Vice Chair, would you like to clean up this agenda and propose a more formal agenda?
I think it's important to present the interior corridor so people still have that fresh, because you lose, we don't see that all the time, and that's a pretty important map.
Talking about that FEGN network.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the title of it is, but it's just the larger corridors, the emerald necklace or whatever you called it before.
Alachua County.
Yeah, within the county, and then in the context of outside the county.
Well, it's state law,
Yeah.
I think just to let you all know what some of our discussion has been, is that preparing the supporting information for this workshop is also going to give us the opportunity to kind of refresh our approach to some of these corridors and identifying priority areas. So I think that, what you see here, we will be addressing in the workshop, but the exact kind of ordering and shape of it might morph a little bit as we go through the process of preparing the information for the workshop. So as long as we know things you're definitely not interested or things you're much more interested in. We'll make sure those are included. But that will give us a little bit of leeway in terms of how we approach and assemble the information for discussion and for sharing.
Well, I personally would like to see. Just basically what the proposed final agenda will look like for our next meeting in March. So that we can nail that down, so that we have it formalized, so when we have the workshop, we have an agenda prepared.
Yeah, great.
It sounds like Melissa wants to help with that.
I really enjoy editing things to make them shorter, so I'm more than happy to help, but I also acknowledge y'all are the ones who really have to be presenting, so however you'd like me to fold me into that process.
Okay,
'Cause I'm not gonna be the one talking about these items, so happy to do that.
okay, thanks.
Cool. All right. New business. There's nothing under new business. Staff updates. Acquisition updates, and sounds like unless you had something specific on the funding update.
Now you just heard it.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought. Michael's not here. Do we have acquisition updates?
Fill that role. I'm Kevin, senior planner. And coordinate land acquisition. Believe I've met you at Kim and Tats. Do you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I knew
know
you
it's
looked
familiar.
familiar, yeah. Anyway, small world.
Yeah.
Okay, so really exciting. There's a nice theme associated with the next 3 maps, and that's Santa Fe River. We did close on Bell, January 31st, which was right after our last meeting. That was a partnership ACT purchase north of the river, the county purchased the red south of the river. So I'm gonna zip through these next, please. This is a super recent closing, February 10th, just last week. In red, we purchased the Matthews property. Santa Fe River is here. It's adjacent to the Odom Preserve that the county already owns. And we have basically an entrance feature here into that. Yes.
Sorry, any chit chat on some of those adjacencies?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We just had a meeting with landowners here and here.
Okay.
As soon as the Alachua County markers go in, kind of triggers things out of the neighbors, for better or for worse. But it was a really great.
Mixed.
What's that?
I'm gonna guess in this case it was
It
mixed.
was mixed, but it was a really good meeting.
Good.
And yes, indeed, we met the individual who owns this and definitely gave him my card. The challenge with something like that, it's legacy in the family, given from the parents, planning on kind of giving it, but at the same time, he did say, everything's for sale. So the doors.
That might work for a CD too.
But let me tell you this, acquiring these 2 pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Would make a lovely, I mean, the ownership here on the western side has all of this river frontage. It's amazing. We have definitely reached out to all those 2.
Thank you.
So it is on our radar. Okay, this is what we are currently working on. Due diligence is about done, but we're trying to come to a landing March 17th, also on the Santa Fe River. Although this is really the headwaters, this is a beautiful swamp here. The Bell property is just to the west downstream. And so the district, I guess, is in works with the landowner to purchase on the east side of the railroad track. And that would be then contiguous with their ownership there. So that is our next closing. So we are ecstatic that we had the opportunity to work on the Santa Fe River 3 times in a row. So Pretty happy about that. This is a long time coming. We are not 100% locked in, but the LOI has been accepted. We are just about to hand the sellers our contract. It has been massaged by our legal representatives for a while now, and it's about ready. So if all goes well, we would plan on bringing this contract to the county commission March 28th.
I just have to add, I worked on this 18 years ago, literally 18 years ago.
I'll just mention that this is also a partner with ACT would be purchasing the road frontage here, and the county would be purchasing the lake frontage and its adjacency to the Paget track that we purchased years ago.
You refresh a recollection on why did we not put those parcels on the list? Why is ACT acquiring those?
Oh, it is because of the burden of the different layered mineral rights
I
reservations.
see.
So, yeah, we found that it would probably be easier for them to handle.
Okay.
And then oddly enough, we found out during research that the county already owns this roughly 10-acre borrow pit right there. And that's why it's important to get all the title work and dig in deep. You can't buy it twice. So, anyway, next, please.
You can. Makes for headlines.
It doesn't make us look great. Just yesterday, we had an appraisal tour on another conservation easement, which definitely has an agricultural flavor. So you might notice all the colors, and these are different zones or management areas of the land currently. And some of these are preservation, for example, in the brown that's wrapping around the creek system. This creek system flows into eventually Mill Creek Sink. So our main goal is to protect these tributaries. It's Dog Branch,
Bad
Dog Branch. So that is our goal here. In the future, we might be able to add additional. Some of these neighbors are probably looking at how this goes.
So this was a lot of work on staff, how to create all those different
All-
areas and.
All easements are so much work up front. You're basically creating the entire template, every detail, because then the appraisers need to know
What can be done.
what can and cannot be done in order to give us a value. So all the mapping and all the text of the conservation easement is done prior to appraisals, so you have no idea how committed they are until you
That's
give
right,
them
you
an offer.
negotiate all those preservation areas with them, and back
Right.
and forth.
Right.
It's very,
Easements are very arduous compared to fee simple. I just find sometimes they're the only way to make it happen. And to bridge that connection or protection, but it is an amazing amount of staff time. And we also applied for a district water management district grant for matching funds. So that's another kind of upfront. So we have that, hopefully approximately 50% of the purchase already earmarked. And
That'd be Swanee.
Yeah,
yes. Okay, next, please. I just kind of listed a bunch of properties that we're just about to start appraisals on. So real quickly, this is Watermelon Pond. So anything in Watermelon Pond is on our radar. And this has a interesting history, but it is, you can see that it's wrapped with conservation, pre-existing conservation land, and the county owning just to the south there, and actually the county parks department here, and we own to the east. It's just would be a phenomenal collection here, and we're looking super forward.
Good luck. Wow.
Yes. This is the Rhymes property. I believe you have worked on this as well. But this is an interesting connection as well. District land to the east. This is Cross Creek, so the Yearling Restaurant is right to the southwest of here. anyway, that's coming up in the near future. For
There's some
appraisal.
easements around there, right? Or some easements to you, or is on the other side?
Conservation easements.
Yeah, the owners, I think donated them. But maybe it's on the other side across creek though.
Yeah, maybe I'm.
It is on the other side across creek.
This is an in holding, 40 acres. This would be I believe we talked about this prior. This would be a life estate. Laclusa Slough surrounds this 40 acres and it would be a lovely opportunity to fill that gap. And this one,
Oh, yeah.
has been on kind of list as well for a while. Charlie did submit a grant application also to the Swanee River Water Management District, and it's kind of working through the pipeline there to see if it's awarded. Looks pretty favorable. And so
It was awarded.
it was, that's right, that's what,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the other, we have a third one in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And the next steps here are a visit, DEP, and then hopefully towards appraisals. And I believe that's all. We do have a stack of other projects we're working on, but that's kind of.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kevin. I believe that is it. Next meeting date, March 23rd. Anybody know that they're going to not be present?
I don't think I will be. In fact, I know I won't be.
Okay. All right. Any public comment? Willie, anything left?
Y'all are doing an amazing job.
Appreciate that. Of
Can I make a comment?
course, you're a member of the public.
Yeah, I would, I think it'd be information, especially before, if we're gonna do this, workshop. The presentation that Andy gave to the county commission and discussion around that, it goes February 7th, Thursday. I'm sure everyone here already knows, you can go on the county commission's website, find the agenda and back up, you can see the presentation, but you can also watch the video. And I think it's really informative. Maybe you can send a link, by email.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, that would be helpful. All right, and I always struggle whether or not we should take a vote to adjourn or
Move
not.
to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Did anybody ever against it?
I want to stay here longer, damn it. Thank you all.